difference between being a good artist and kind of struggling with it. Oh, hot. That's a great start. My name is Max Romey, and I am a filmmaker and a painter, and occasionally I drown myself with hot liquids. It's a side project. But when I'm not doing that, I feel like I'm always looking for that one trick, or like that one thing that can make everything just that much simpler and make art that much more possible. After 20 years of doing this stuff, I think I finally know what it is. But before I tell you, I gotta say, with a lot of art, I have kind of found out the hard way. I grew up with dyslexia, so watercolor for me kind of became a big language. You can't misspell a painting, and in a world of words and typing and spelling errors and a tough kind of track through school, I found art just to be the one thing that I could do that was entirely my own, and I loved it. Got out of school, became a filmmaker, traveled all over the world making cool films, everything, but I always had that sketchbook or 2 or 3 or 4 in my pocket or in a backpack at all times, and I feel like I was always just sketching something because it's kind of how like my brain processed the world. And then piece by piece, film by film, occasionally the film and the watercolor would mix, or the watercolor would be about the film, and like slowly, piece by piece, all of this kind of got mashed together. And now, more or less, most of my day, I am painting and filming and mixing the two of them, and I am amazed by how hard it still is. I mean, I must have made thousands of paintings. They're all over the place. They're just books and books and books and trail tile tins just full of them, but like, for some weird reason, every single page is almost like starting from scratch. Like every single blank page is almost as if I'm back at square one. And so I'm always looking for those little tiny tricks or little tiny, I don't know, like little tiny somethings to get beyond that first brushstroke or that first start, because that concern is always there. And if anything, it's just like getting stronger. So I've been looking for the tips and the tricks to actually getting started, and here are 5 with the main one, honestly, I think like the biggest piece at the end. The first trick is to make sure that it's with you. Or I guess the problem is that it's not with you. Like that's the issue. And I cannot explain the amount of times that I have been in a perfect spot or had the perfect time or whatever it would be, and I don't have, a sketchbook or some paper or something that will derail everything. And the amount of times that I have wished I had a sketchbook is so much higher than the amount of times that I wish I didn't bring a sketchbook or a trail tile or just art supplies or something. I rarely regret having this stuff with me, even if I don't use it. So what I've done is I have brought a bunch of really small sketchbooks. I used to work in huge stuff. This is about as big as I do now. Trail tiles have been massive for me, so bringing like little sheets of watercolor paper, more or less wherever I am, has been huge. You use the stuff that's in your pocket. You could have the best art supplies in the world in your studio, or you could have the most perfect paint and everything curated with incense and pretty music playing. But if it's not where you are, you're not gonna make anything. And there's never time like the present. You're always gonna take a picture and then kind of forget what inspired you. So whatever it is, I think trick number 1 is just have it with you if you can. Even if that's just in the car or at the dentist appointment or whatever it is, make sure you use something that you bring. Trick number 2 is to use less color, which is a weird thing for me to say, especially with watercolor. It's kind of about like how much color can you fit on something. But the more that I've painted, the more that I've realized the less colors I use, the more colorful my paintings and really just art becomes. Like there's still a ton of colors, but you don't need a ton for them to kind of combine and merge and mix on the page. I think honestly there's probably like some kind of an analogy for life in here too, like something about how when you simplify one thing, the rest of your life becomes, more colorful or something. But when it comes strictly to watercolor as well, it kind of feels like the less I use and the smaller my palette becomes, the more colorful everything else is. And I do find that when I have just a lot of colors, that indecision and those choices become so much harder. That being said, I love colors. Like I would snap up a palette with 150 colors in a heartbeat. I mean, just even pencil sets, when you see them all there, oh my gosh, they're so perfect. But when it comes to actually making artwork and creating it, the less colors, the better. I think I've got, 10 in this set, and my normal set has about 8. And that's slowly getting smaller and smaller. And the more paintings you use, the more you'll realize kind of what those core colors are. It's okay to start with 150, but if you can, try to knock that down to 149, maybe 148. Tip number 3 is to put a box on it, which makes more sense when I actually show you. But basically, even a page can be terrifying, but if you can kind of break stuff up into boxes, if you can sort of literally just sketch a box out on something, whether it's a huge page or even, you sketch a box around the entire page, something like that, those lines become the first line on the page. It's like a little bit of a mind twist. It's really scary to make the first mark, because what if you mess it up? But if that first mark is just part of a box, you already messed up the page, and so there's, nowhere to go but have fun with it. Or at least that's how I think of it. So most of my paintings start with a little bit of a box line around stuff, or I'll even break up the page even smaller and make a, box here and a box there, and maybe fill the rest out. But it's some, how, I don't know what the psychology around it is, but it makes it so much less scary. It kind of breaks the creme brulee or the surface tension or whatever it is. You got that first crack, and all the rest feel so much simpler to go from there. Every other one of those lines, once you have these 4, they make just a little bit of a box. Try it out. It's a weird thing. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but for me, this has been a game changer. Trick number 4 is to go small. Obviously, something like this is not super small. I really love how this painting turned out. This is a big one. I make very few of these because they take a lot of time, and if you make a little mistake, it is petrifying. But in order to even make anything like this, I have to start here, which are these little tiny sketches I make. I make maybe 10 to 15, sometimes 30 or 40 of these a week. Little tiny sketches, or just a little tiny sketchbook, whatever you got. My whole life as an artist, I've had art teachers tell me to go big, to paint big. And it has made me feel like art doesn't count unless it's enormous. You see these things on walls and they're expensive and gigantic. So why wouldn't you paint it big? But I always liked stuff like this. I like how you can see the little texture in it. I like how the mountains just feel a little bit more big in a small sense. I like how you have to condense an entire landscape, and I really like how it just feels like a tiny puzzle piece out of the big picture. But it took me decades to kind of sink into that and realize it's okay to go small. And that's how a lot of this stuff starts. It starts with a little sketch, it starts with a tiny painting, and then from there you can then make the enormous stuff if you want later on. But it all starts with this, and nobody talks about that. They only give you the awards for this or pay the big money for the big piece. But when it comes to actual artists making actual stuff, don't be afraid to go small. A whole lot less scary to start. You can put a lot more effort into it. You can create 30 of these, full, big, fancy, all finished paintings in the time that you can finish one of those big ones. And from there, you can expand any of those. So I really think it just it makes your options a little better. And also it's just a little cleaner. I don't know how to say it. It's the difference between a big carved stone wheel and a bicycle wheel full of spokes. A bunch of little things can make just as, it's a weird analogy, but you get it. Go small, try it out. Do it small, and then it might have a big impact on the rest of your, creations. And finally, number 5. I did not see this one coming, but it has kind of made all the difference. Bit of a backstory. Sorry, I'm not burying the lead here, but for so long, I have thought that professional artists needed organization, or they needed they needed some strict regiment of something. Maybe they made some certain amount of paintings, or they had some perfect certain drawing technique that the Renaissance painters used, and that's what could make a really good painting. But having painted and failed, and then gotten back into it and failed, and gotten back into it and struggled, and gotten back into it, and the whole cycle, I am learning that the one thing that can keep you coming back and that can make you a good painting is just doing more of it. And you will only do more of it if you are curious and have fun. You can be as serious as you want, but at some level, deep down in there, there's just a little piece of you that's curious. And there's something super fun about what you're doing. But you can't succeed and you can't go super far unless there's that little piece in you that finds the joy and finds the fun in what you're doing. Because it's going to be hard. Watercolor in particular, it is a very tough thing to do well. And it is constantly tripping me up and changing the rules and freezing in Alaska. But if you can have fun with it, if you can just be curious about what happens if you add gin to your water and paint with it, or if you can be, if you can have fun with what you're adding in or the way you're painting, whatever it is, just have fun. Because you don't become a good artist by painting 1,000 still lifes that you think other people are going to want to buy. And you don't become a famous artist by painting what you think other people are going to care about. You succeed when you can create the stuff that you find fun and that you find amusing. And the beauty in all of that is you get to love each one of those paintings all the way through, whether or not it turns out well. It's curiosity and fun. That's really what it is. It's really what it comes down to. And I wish there was like one trick that could keep those in the front of mind or make those easier to find, because it can be a needle in a haystack with a lot of this. But if you can pursue those, or if you can use those as your barrier, to get entry. Am I going in the right direction? Is it something I'm curious about? Is it something I'm having fun with? If those two are in this, in that direction, take it. Because it's only by making those mistakes and making the paintings and falling down and getting back up, that's how you become a good artist. And for 20 years, it's what I've been doing and not even realizing it. But piece by piece and choice by choice, I am slowly following that path, and it's what led me right here. It's amazing to be able to use art in this way. I love where it's going. I have no idea what's going to come next, and I know it's going to change. But the way that I could only really trip myself up, like the only way you can even fail in art, is if you don't do it for fun or for love or for curiosity. If you just make art because that's what somebody else wants, or you make art to sell it, that's not art, that's production. True watercolor involves curiosity, it involves fun, and after that, the sky's the limit. You barely even need to use paint. I mean, soy sauce could work well enough, or water, or any of the other things. None of that really matters so long as you find that little thread that you find interesting. And I'm super curious what that is. If you have any thoughts or you have any directions, I would love if you would send it over. We actually have a P.O. box now, which is really great, and my hope is to cover this wall with little sketches and questions and things people send, because that is what gets me so excited. I love making the sketches, but I love sending them out into the world, and it's like echolocation. The stuff people kind of bounce back with, like, oh, this community is just the coolest. So those are my 5. I think my tea is finally cool enough to drink, but I'm curious, what are your tricks? What are your tips? What would you say is the thing that can kind of keep you painting or keep you creating even when stuff gets tough? Because I'm all ears, when I'm not burning myself with tea.